Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
So, welcome again to all of you. In today's session, we will be discussing on rural electrification. Before we move to the session on these provisions related to distribution, transmission, generation, and what are the salient provisions, salient features which are incorporated there in those, in relation to those segments. In today's session, we will try to understand that how the rural electrification has been governed in this country. Obviously, this takes us to this question that why we are talking about rural electrification as a separate category. And in this, we will try to understand that how rural electrification has been dealt, what exactly it signifies in the Indian context, and then we will also look into the provisions of the Electricity Act, that how the Act has addressed the issue of electrification in villages, in remote areas, and then we will also try to understand that what are the different plans, schemes which the government has formulated till date, on these issues, and also along with that we will try to understand what are the challenges which have come forward and then the issues connected therewith. Now, when you talk about rural electrification, as I said that why we are talking about rural electrification as a separate category, what is the need of that, why electrification in general is not been talked about, and perhaps it has to do with the very possibility of providing the infrastructure at every corner of this country, and which certainly involves the cost. To large extent, the spread of electricity has been a successful drive under the 1948 Act, Electricity Supply Act, where one of the aim was to ensure broader reach of the electricity, to see that even electricity reaches to other semi-urban cities as well as to rural areas, I would say. So, the requirement, infrastructural requirement, perhaps at one go is not possible to provide electricity and the rural areas. The requirement of electricity for industrial use, for commercial use, setting a sort of priority about where the generated electricity should be diverted to or transported to. Now, when we have enough installed generation capacity, I think there is a need to done away with this segregation between rural electrification and the rest. This is one way of looking at it, that let us not acknowledge the distinction, let us not acknowledge the segregation, because the moment we acknowledge it, impliedly we are accepting different processes for electrification. Impliedly we are accepting that strategies need to be different, and when we say that, obviously it has a linkage with the resource allocation. When we say this, certainly it has a connection with prioritization, and in that you would agree with me that rural electrification has not been truly addressed till date. with this categorization, with prioritization, our villages are still not been supplied with quality electricity, though in recent time there has been a success of providing electricity to every household. That is what the data of the government also says. But then the question comes, is all about providing electricity for lighting purposes, providing electricity for lighting as well as the use of household appliances, and then ensuring of reliabilities, that the electricity what is being supplied is reliable in nature. Now, how do you understand rural electrification? The ministry suggests that when we talk about rural electrification, we are talking about basic infrastructure such as distribution transfer, distribution lines, which are which are provided in the area where population is there. That is what it says. And then in order to ensure inclusiveness, in order to ensure that the access to electricity reaches even to the marginalized section of the society, it has been suggested that for rural areas it has to be considered also that where people belonging to scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, they are residing. So that if infrastructure is laid down, if necessary arrangements are being made, then it must not be used only by influential section of the society, only by the one who are well off in the society. And that is why this categorically this provision has been there. It also says that if public places are being electrified, if electric connection has reached there, for example, schools, hospitals, obviously hospitals what we mean is primary health centers, dispensaries, panchayat office, community centers, then that also is something which testifies the fact that okay, electrification has done. And in terms of quantification, it says that if number of households electrified is at least 10%, then it is to be considered that that area is, that village is electrified. Though this is I would say an older understanding. Now, it is no more with regard to the 10%. Now, we are talking about ensuring the access to electricity at every household. So, this understanding has now been moved to a larger and more I would say nearer to the very argument of the very debate discourse on connecting electricity with dignified life, because we cannot say that if 10% is 10% of the population, 10% of the household, they are enjoying electricity, then for the purposes of government planning, that village is connected and that village is completely given the electric connection. So, now obviously, as I said, the understanding has graduated and now it is every household, and as I said that there is a very huge success in ensuring that every household gets a electric connection. Now, how the law is placed, when you look at the Electricity Act, what is the contribution of the legislative framework provided under the Electricity Act, how it has been done. So, then in that regard it says that section 4 says that central government shall prepare a kind of policy which is needed, prepare and notify on consultation with the state governments, policy on standalone system including renewables. Standalone system is something which is not grid connected. Now, you can very well understand that somewhere it has been acknowledged that let us not wait until the grid connection reaches to villages. Make a plan of providing electricity even before grid connection reaches there, and how it is possible, that is what the mandate given on the act. It says that okay, let there be a policy made by the central government, where we can talk about a standalone where the generation is not connected with grid. And then this is, I would say, a kind of realistic goal. Why realistic goal? That laying down the infrastructure, coming up with a specification which requires a grid connection, all this involves the cost. And when it comes to the basic necessity, I have been saying this, that electricity is one of the basic necessities of human being. Then we cannot wait that let the resources gets allocated first, and then only we can talk about the access. And then moving further, when you look at section 5 further says that let the central government formulate a policy in order to suggest a pathway to all the stakeholders, and that policy must also contain about the bulk purchase of power. Bulk purchase of power in a sense that where you need not wait for the distribution licenses to come there, because again once you expect that the distribution licenses would come there, they will establish their own infrastructure and all, it will take time. So, there is a way out suggested, and what is the way out? It says that let the local distribution happen through panchayats, through user associations, through cooperative societies, through NGOs, through franchises. Why? Because if we really make a kind of timeline and plan something the way it has been happening in urban areas, then it will take unreasonably longer time for ensuring the availability of electricity in rural areas. So, therefore, it has been suggested that let there be a distributed generation, let there be a decentralized distribution, let it not be connected with grid, let the local community come forward for the same. Even if it is connected with grid, do not wait for the DISCOMs to come. You give this platform to the users association, panchayats, let them operate as distribution licenses. And interestingly, when you look at section 14, 8th proviso, what it says, that the one who is there in distributed generation in rural areas, they need not take a license. So, that has been also done away with. So, law in a way promotes the availability of electricity in that area. And then it says what is the aim, why distributed generation has been suggested, that when you talk about or when you accept the reality that in far flung areas, in remote areas, it will take time for grid connected electricity to reach, then meanwhile let this be also the responsibility of the government. Now, for the responsibility, you look at what section 6 is. Section 6 is very differently worded, I would say. When you look at the marginal note suggests joint responsibility of the central government and the state government. Obviously, it goes with the very constitutional scheme where electricity falls in the concurrent list, as you are fully aware about it. Now, but when you read the text of the act, what section 6 is? It says it shall be a joint endeavor. Now, joint endeavor and joint responsibility, as a law student, I would say that it would convey two different nature of obligation. The degree varies. Endeavor is a softer approach, I would say. Responsibility to me appears to be kind of a strong note that okay, you have to do this, and I would prefer to read the meaning, I would prefer to give that interpretation which will be imposing higher obligation on the center and the state, not only because the very fact that electricity must reach to every household, but also because of this very understanding that access to electricity as we have studied, is fundamental for fulfilling many rights, education, health, social security, many rights are connected with that. And that is how I look at the responsibility which is given under section 6. Again I said, when you look at section 13, no, section 5, 6 talks about making a policy. You make a policy, involve the local population, no need to wait for the DISCOMs, involve the local population. And if local population is getting involved, then they need not obtain the license. That is what section 13 says, and that is to be done because now we have, through 2003 Act, made a regulation where decisions are to be made on a much more transparent way. Appropriate commission has been given this authority, given this responsibility that okay, you identify that whether local distribution by granting exemption is fulfilling the purpose or not, is it really required or not, and but that is something which is to be done only when the appropriate government is recommending. Now, why this involvement of the appropriate government? Because one of the objectives of the Act is to promote power market. So, the promotion, the growth of power market will happen only when there is very well defined revenue channel, revenue flow, and somewhere these exceptions must be subject to those minimum standards, minimum requirement which will ensure the flow of revenue, and for this appropriate government certainly has a role to play. In pursuant to section 5, right after the notification of national electricity policy, the government has notified rural electrification policy in the year 2006. Now, when you look at it, it says it is largely the responsibility of the state governments, where they are required to prepare a rural electrification plan to achieve the goal. And again, here you look at it, what is the goal? Access to all households. This is something which again and again I am stressing, reflects on the nature of this commodity. This is not to be seen a commodity only for leading a luxurious life, no, not at all. And there where I would say the benefit of electricity falling under the concurrent list, then it becomes the responsibility of central and state government. State government nearer to the population can very well come up with an effective plan, and that plan can be supplemented by the effort of the central government. Now, this says, the policy says that okay, you notify your area as a rural areas, and that you should do it within 2 months of the notification. And I was looking at the literature that how the state government has discharged this responsibility, which has been suggested in rural electrification policy in 2006, and obviously the data was not very pleasant, it was not very encouraging. Policy of 2006 also takes up a very practical approach. It says that let there be a kind of promotion of both off grid and on grid electricity generation, because it will take time when we only focus on grid connected electricity. Therefore, let there be off grid also be equally promoted. And then further it says, obviously taking clue from section 5, when you look at it, that standalone system is something which is important, where the geographical constraints are there, where it will take time for laying down the transmission infrastructure, substations and all this. Then till the time let there be standalone system also work. And why till the time? The way the renewables are being becoming more competitive, perhaps a standalone system is a viable alternative for ensuring the access to electricity. It says that again the joint responsibility in pursuant to that, And interestingly, it further trickles down, it further brings down the participation of the stakeholders. It says that at the district level let there be a district committee, and there is a provision in the act for entrusting the responsibility on the district committee. So, every stakeholder should be involved, and then it says it is a district committee which shall have a responsibility to notify through the standalone system and grid extension. It says that distributed generation is another important alternative, where generation is taking place, and with that generating units also engaging in distribution or supply of electricity. And for that, obviously, as we have discussed, license is not required. We will read more about distribution generation when we will take up renewable energy as a module. There we will have a detailed discussion that what are the benefits of distributed generation. As I said that the responsibility is given to the local committee, to the district committee. This is all to ensure that let every stakeholder gets involved in the whole process. Now, it is not true that the focus on rural electrification started with the enactment of 2003 Act. Rural electrification has been the agenda of this government right after independence, and this is very much established when you just leaf through the initiatives taken by the government. 1969 appears to be one such year where a big initiative was taken, where this Rural Electrification Corporation was established, and this Electrification Corporation is till date playing a phenomenal role in ensuring the availability of electricity in remote areas of the country. It is, in fact, it is nodal agencies for flagship programs of the government. 1969, this corporation was established with an idea that let there be an institution which shall give loan, which shall give financial assistance for setting up pump sets for irrigation. It was realized when drought affected this country that agriculture cannot depend upon monsoon alone. There has to be some other plan to be made, and in order to implement that, it was suggested that let there be an institution which shall be responsible for extending the financial support, for electrification projects. So, it started way back in 1969. 74 fifth 5-year plan identified minimum needs, and I find it a very great contribution of 5th 5-year plan. What is that? That it says that it is one of the basic need. The very expression basic need reflects that this is something which is non-negotiable, non-derogable. You cannot visualize a human existence or humane existence in the absence of this. 1988-89, you have a Kutir Jyoti scheme, which says that single point light connections to households of rural poor families, and then it also says that let there be 100% grant to be given under this scheme. And then 2004-5 Government of India launched another program called Accelerated Rural Electrification, where it was said that 1 lakh villages and 1 crore households are to be provided electricity. 2005, again a very significant plan which was announced, Rajiv Gandhi Gramin Vidyutikaran Yojana, wherein the object was said that 100% electrification of villages are to be achieved with access to households. Now, the Rajiv Gandhi Gramin Vidyut Karan Yojana has been subsumed in Deen Dayal Upadhyay Gramin Jyoti Yojana. That is why I am highlighting this, what are the main features of this scheme. You find that here in this scheme it was suggested that let the purpose be distinguished for understanding the consumption pattern. Non-agricultural purposes are to be identified separately from the agriculture purposes, because if you consider them in one single frame, then financial viability of DISCOMs would be a big concern. As we have discussed while discussing the introductions of the act and introduction of this subject, that DISCOMs are really in a poor financial position, and one reason is their ability to recover the cost from the residential consumers, agricultural consumers, rural consumers, and therefore, it is suggested that let there be a different feeder, so that at least the government can make a plan. Government can make a plan depending upon the season, depending upon the timeline, depending upon the crop pattern, that what kind of electricity, what volume of electricity is to be supplied in what region. It further says that let there be a substantial improvement done on distribution and infrastructure and sub-transmission infrastructure in rural areas, because that is one of the concern. If you go to villages, obviously this may not be the scenario now, but 10 years ago, you would find that there are no transformers in villages, or it is being there is a transformer, but it is scattering a large population. So, infrastructure is to be augmented, that is what is needed, and for this it was suggested that let 60% come from the government, state DISCOMs to be given, they have to raise 10% of fund, and 30% is to be borrowed from financial institutions and banks. That is what it says. 2017, we have another scheme which the government has announced, that is Saubhagya scheme, Pradhan Mantri Sahaj Bijli Har Ghar Yojana. This is again to ensure universal household electrification. So, universal signifies very important meaning. Universal is something which is that accessibility must be based on the principle of equity or equality. And then it says that how do you understand that to whom to prioritize in terms of providing electricity? It said that let the marginalized section get priority, and that is to be done on the basis of 2011 data which the government has collected, and the government said that these beneficiaries, let them get free electricity. Now, free electricity is, I would say, certainly a matter to be properly and very diligently evaluated, that who all are eligible to get free electricity. And then it says that for other households the connection should be rupees 500, and this can be collected in installments. That is what it says. Now, Deen Dayal Upadhyay Yojana is something which is very broad. It does not it is something which has a focus of the village, but then obviously it is more on making it more deeper and connecting it with households, not only confining it to bigger pockets, not only confining it to a group, but then the going to the main real users of the electricity. With all these schemes, with all these acts, still what you find that there are challenges. What are the challenges? The first and foremost is that with this scheme, the government has successfully established the infrastructure for the supply of electricity. Now, there is electric connection in every household, but then the question comes in, is that connection reliable and qualitative one? Is it 24/7 quality supply of electricity? So, that becomes a big challenge. Now, in order to ensure qualitative supply, infrastructure is needed. The distribution licenses, they need to invest, and we know very well that the financial condition of distribution licenses are not very sound. So, if they do not have enough money in their pocket, they are not going to really invest in rural electrification infrastructure, and that is something which is a big challenge. Another is, as I said, when you look at the use of electricity for agricultural purposes, for irrigation purposes, we need to make a plan very strategically. Why? Because if you give free electricity for irrigation purposes, there is all possibility of wastage of not only electricity, but also of water. Because then in that case, with free electricity, the pump sets will be on even when it is not needed. So, therefore, this residential versus agriculture use, as I said, it already been attempted to address in one of the schemes. Then the issue of subsidized tariff, that has to be rationalized. It is not that everyone who resides in village, they are having inability to pay electricity bill. We need to plan the subsidy in a very fair and transparent manner, that how it should be done. And then high maintenance and operation cost in villages, because of maybe issues of non-availability of manpower at the block level, at the tahsil level, the issues of theft. So, all this involves cost, and then the very capability to retain electricity. Government has given the electricity supply. Now, there is electric connection in a house which is located in the remotest part of the country, but then whether the owner of the house is interested to retain that electricity or not. Connection has come, but whether that person is interested to retain, that is very important. Because when you are connecting access to electricity with all kind of socio-economic entitlements, then that person must be also interested to retain, and interested to retain has to do with ability to pay also. So, these are the challenges for rural electrification. Thank you very much.